Thank you for working with us. This is the first time you've experienced Havening techniques.
It is, yeah.
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 Great. And we're on a training course.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're very experienced in lots of different
Yeah,
disciplines.
yeah.
and
I
all.
use lots of different therapies and have done for a long time.
Great, cool. So what would you like to work on? We can work content free, or we can...
No, I'm happy to share it. So it's a memory of, how old are my kids now? 20. So they would have been, it's about a 15-year-old memory.
Okay.
And it was at the seaside in Cornwall on a really stormy day.
Okay.
And I stupidly sent the kids, so the sea was coming in,
Yeah.
and there was a cliff like that, and I could see beach on the other side. So I said to them, when the waves go back out again, you leg it round,
Yeah.
and then I'll follow you.
Yeah.
So they were only very little, and they went around, and then I was shouting at them to see, because all of a sudden, I couldn't tell whether they got round or whether they'd been taken by the sea.
Oh.
So I was thinking maybe they were drowning.
Yeah.
But then by that time the sea had come in too far, and I couldn't get round.
Yeah, you couldn't see either.
I couldn't see either.
Yeah.
So I had to run over the top of the cliff
Oh.
and back round. And
Yeah.
I still remember to this day thinking, what am I going to tell my wife
Yeah.
if we can't find them?
Yeah.
And then when I got back down there, I couldn't find them, but they'd gone and hidden in a cave, just to sort of. But then I found them.
Right.
So, but that memory still, if I go down to that particular cove, then I still will get a kind of
Yeah.
memory of it, and that thing about, and even now, if the dog's out of sight for too long, because it's that thing about someone
Yeah.
that needs you sort of thing. I think.
Yeah.
Then you feel, I think there's a sort of pattern match happens there as well.
Yeah.
So where
I
you kind of
think
have
so.
that kind of feeling. So
Yeah.
that's the event.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting. It's interesting how it's come. It's still the pattern affects you now.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's not necessary.
No, no.
Really. So what we could do, we're being filmed, so we
Yeah.
could do quite an interesting thing where we could use event havening, which is a process which we use when there's a clear event, as there is in this case,
Yeah.
one event. So that probably would be ideal. And what we can do is activate that thought which you've just done, just by and actually you activate it when you're, when you have that experience with the dogs. So we're going to activate that again, and then we're going to distract you. So, and when we do the distraction, I could use telling you about the science of what's happening as a distraction.
Okay.
We could do that, and
Yeah,
then we
that'd be
kind of
good.
see how we go. So normally we do. I use that distraction quite often, actually, but there's lots of different ways. We can talk about distraction within that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's go for that. So if you close your eyes and take yourself back to that event and just see what you saw, hear what you heard, and feel what you felt. As you're running over the top and having that internal dialogue about what you would say to your wife and all of those things that happened. And I imagine as well, it took up a lot of breath to run round there. And then there's quite a lot to this event. In some ways it's several events, isn't it? Because it's almost like if we had a movie of our lives, it's a sequence of things. So you can notice as well if there's a particular part that is the most powerful emotionally now, and just notice your emotions. And this is more than likely the last time it'll feel like this, so just allow yourself to go there. You're safe with me.
Yeah. I'm there.
Okay. What number would you give it if we were using the scale that we looked at earlier?
Probably a 7.
Yeah.
7 or an 8.
And can you name the emotion, or is it emotions?
I think it's fear.
Fear. Okay. Great work. Thank you. So if you open your eyes and come out of that, what I'd like to do is start doing some havening touch, if that's okay. And we've already done a little
Yeah.
bit, so you're familiar with it. So if you put your palms out, first of all, and just relax them really comfortably there, so you can just be really relaxed. And what we want to do now is just do distraction, because
Okay.
we've activated that thought. So I know you're quite fascinated by the science of it, and you already know a lot about neurology and all of these different things. And the others here, we haven't talked yet about what happens when something like this happens to us as human beings. What happens is the brain, our system, is set up to keep us safe. So when this sensory information comes in and we have to survive, we have to be safe, the information takes a different track to the brain. It goes to the amygdalae. We have two amygdala, or two amygdalae, and they are quite deep in our head. They're like little almonds back here. We've got some pictures later on that we'll look at. And inside the amygdala, we have neurons, which, if you imagine, they become, the receptors on them become activated. So if I say that this is like the two neurons, when something like this happens, these things called AMPA receptors pop out. They probably come out quite slowly. And they hold the information in some way. They hold the sensory information. And when the thing doesn't resolve, when there's quite a lot to it and just nobody rescues us from it, then a material a bit like a cement or a gluey material comes in between them. It's a kinase, and it holds them in place. And the idea is that they could stay in place for your whole life, and they're there. And what's fascinating about havening is it causes these to change. And the way, if I do your arms as well, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The way that it causes them to change is the havening touch generates a delta wave. So it's a slow electrical wave. And that engages with calcium in the brain, and it becomes calcineurin. That's what we think is happening. Do your palms again. And the calcineurin has the ability to change the phosphorylate, the kinase, which is here. And it engages with that, and this comes away. So the AMPA receptors are able to go back into the neuron. So we go back to our two neurons with the AMPA receptors, and they go back and they're reabsorbed into the neuron. So we end up with two clean neurons. So it's like going back to the beginning again.
Mm.
So I think what's happening when we're doing this process is that, first of all, when you had those thoughts, you access that memory of that event. It activates that area, and even me talking about it just now probably activates it a bit. And then having the delta wave at the same time, your brain, the system, kind of goes, oh, Mike's okay, we're all right. Huh. Oh. And the depotentiation process starts happening. It takes about 10 minutes for the process. So we want to keep doing the havening touch. You can, of course, apply the havening touch yourself. So, if you like, you can do some on your face, and you can just imagine that slow delta wave, that process occurring. So by talking about the science, it hopefully engages a different part of your brain, but that's
It
of
did,
interest.
because I hadn't heard about that sort of bit about the sort of gluey bit. That was quite new to me.
Yeah.
But also, it reminded me of someone. There is a way of showing how the amygdala works, isn't there? Like a glove and a mitten, which I've come across before, which is like using I think you've heard of that one, haven't you? Yeah. Which is a bit like you can show the amygdala catching something and holding it,
Okay.
and then letting go of it. So,
Okay.
which I've used with clients before. So,
Yeah,
as you
I thought it was like that to begin with.
Yeah.
I actually thought that the AMPA receptors fired across from the other
Yeah.
neuron and sort of stuck on. And then I came to understand that actually they emerged out of the neuron, and then that they can reabsorb.
But they can't reabsorb until they're unglued.
Until they're unglued,
Yeah,
until they're
yeah.
unstuck.
And that made more sense, because
Yeah.
before I'd always seen it as being sort of caught and letting go,
Yeah,
but retracting back in,
yeah,
and being able to retract back in. It's a bit like, if you've got your hand in a bottle and you can't get your hand out of the bottle,
yeah.
but if you let go of the pebble, then you can get your hand out of the bottle, sort of thing.
Yeah, I wonder as well. I've spoken to Ron Rudin about it, who invented havening techniques. I've spoken to him about the thing that happens, when you're, I don't know if this ever happened to you when you're a kid and something happens and you're really scared, and then your parents or some adult or somebody else arrives and they go, oh, it's okay. and you start giggling, really, really, really giggling, and then of course everybody's like, because it's not completely sorted, but they're obviously going to be all right. And then you get a row for giggling, and you can't stop giggling. You're giggling more and more, and it's really inappropriate, but you're like, oh, just not giggling. I used to end up getting a slap. I'm Scottish, so eventually somebody would go, stop that.
So just then, I remember now, once I'd caught them, and they were in the cave messing about.
Yeah.
I remember giving them such a telling off, and being really cross and marching them up the beach, and so, giving them a really telling them off terribly, and then like crying and being upset because actually they hadn't actually done anything wrong.
But they hadn't had your experience.
No, it was me being a negligent parent, and actually then going back and then deciding to say to them, "Don't tell your mum," and then we told her about 6 months later. Because when it felt safe to tell her.
Yeah, and that's an amygdala-based response that happened at the time where you're like, oh,
And I just felt a big sigh come then, and that was like a bit of a.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a let go, actually, I think.
Yeah. Sometimes what happens is you get really sticky tears, and it changes, I think, our ideas as therapists about. I can't even get the word, abreaction.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're really just emotions. And I think these sticky tears that we get may be something to do with the depotentiation. I had one training, everybody had these sticky tears, but we didn't have an analyst. It would have been great if we'd had an analyst to see what was in those tears.
Yeah.
But going back to that giggling, I wonder if that's a natural depotentiation.
Yeah.
So, so something happens, you're a kid, something happens, you're in the amygdala, the AMPA receptors come out, the gluey stuff's coming along, and then parents come along, go, everyone's okay, and the gluey stuff doesn't happen, and the AMPA receptors go back in with all the giggling.
Yeah.
So when you're working, if you can make your distraction really funny, then that works well. You can also use counting, you can use humming, things that activate the brain, and just calibrating.
Yeah.
And the other thing we talked earlier about EMDR and about eye movements, and you can use we have eye movements as part of the Havening technique, so if we do a little bit of that, if that's okay. So you can keep on doing this Havening touch, and if you can keep your head still and just follow my finger. And I'm going to distract you at the same time by telling you a bit about it, that's okay. And what we're actually moving, to keep your head still, is as I understand it, we're moving the little muscles under the eye. And this generates delta wave too. There you go. And relax. Cool. Which I think is quite a fascinating idea that Ron has about it just being, so it's another way to generate delta waves. So we've got delta wave generation, our hands, arms, face, and by moving our eyes. So how are you feeling now?
Yeah, very calm.
Yeah.
Very calm.
And if you'd like to access the memory now, and just notice, you know about internal pictures and submodalities and things, just notice if there's any change in those.
There's a total change. I see them as adults now, and they're both smirking, kind of laughing. They're smirking because of me telling this, of me being able to tell the story, and they just think it's quite funny.
So your emotion is different as well.
Yeah, it is. I'm quite surprised about.
Yeah.
Because that's been there a long time. It doesn't, it's not been one that you wouldn't call it a trauma, but you've just called it a kind of bad memory.
Yeah.
Sort of a scary memory.
I think we tend not to go, I was saying that earlier, certainly in Scotland, if I say to people, if you had a trauma, they're like, no, nothing. And then you get into it and there's all of these things that have happened. And we're great, human beings are such great survivors that it's fascinating when we start looking at what makes that path into the amygdala. And certainly if we're a bit stressed, so you went from being adventure to being a bit stressed, and then I don't know what point was the bit that was the fright, maybe as you went over and didn't see them or something, it then encoded
Yeah.
somehow.
And I think the worst bit was shouting and not hearing any response,
Okay.
because the noise of the sea being so, I mean, it was a rough sea.
Yeah.
So the noise of the sea being so loud, and then your imagination, you see them, you see all the horrible stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so you start making pictures.
Yeah.
So I'm testing it out here, testing my work, even though we're working so quickly. And so when you
Yeah.
think about that, even when we engage in that, how are you?
Just when I thought again of the pictures of and just for a second there was still the picture of them getting washed away was still a little bit there,
Yeah.
but it didn't feel like it did earlier.
Yeah.
But there was still, I mean, Harriet used to wear a blue coat, so what I just saw then was I was
Yeah.
able to find her blue coat, and that's what she was wearing that day.
Great. So even though that didn't happen,
Yeah.
let's consider that was possible. Say there's one ampere receptor left
Yeah.
with that on it. I
Yeah.
don't know how it really works, but conceptually, say
Yeah.
that. Let's haven that. So you've accessed it by
Yeah.
by thinking about it and then telling me about it. So now let's do some more havening touch. Generate some more delta wave. Generate some more calcineurin. Unglue anything that has to be unglued and just. So, tell me about. Let's think of a really good distraction. So we talked a lot about your dogs. What else? What else do you love thinking about? And I would think about something other than the subject that we're working on. I'd think about
Cricket.
cricket. I don't know anything about cricket.
I know everything.
The only closest we got to cricket was at our school. The headmaster bought cricket nets, which were
Yeah.
promptly stolen for poaching fish.
Yeah.
So we never got to learn about cricket.
I know, just like cricket and listen to it if it's on, and listen to it for sort of 7 hours, 6 hours.
And is it very relaxing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you see, if you're listening to it, because it's on the radio, isn't it? And it
Yeah,
can-
I don't like watching on the telly. I like listening to it on the radio. So you have your pictures.
So do you make pictures? Is it very, when you see those pictures, is it very green?
Oh yeah, it's always
Yeah.
it's very green, and because you know what most of the players look like, you can sort of envisage it. And
Yeah.
I just like Henry Blofeld talking about red buses and pigeons and things like that. It's just the most relaxing thing in the world.
Well, it's got a kind of rhythm. Never
Yeah.
heard it.
Yeah.
Kind of, and that noise, the noise that the ball makes on the bat, it's very distinctive kind
Yeah.
of noise. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
and there's always a gentle sort of hubbub of the crowd in the background, and
Sort of summer.
yeah, and you're waiting for something. You're just waiting for something good to happen usually, because you want,
Yeah.
you want either for a wicket to go down, or you want someone to have a blinding innings that you'll remember all your life, or something like that.
Yeah. And what's that when do they run? It's not like rounders, is it? They don't run round. They run back
Yeah,
and forward.
they run back and forward,
Yeah.
but like every now and then, like a few weeks ago when you had Ben Stokes get the fastest 200 in Test match history or
What,
something
did they
like
time
that.
it?
Yeah, they time them as well. It's not part of the game, but they
Yeah.
time everything now. And so, yeah. And that and just sitting there and just being so pleased with myself that I was, I probably should have been working with Sonia, but actually when that was going on, but I think at that point I had the computer on my lap, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure what was going on other than just how exciting it was. Or it might have been a weekend, but it was fabulous.
Cool.
Mm.
You really accessed it there.
Mm.
It's like strong looking.
Mm.
So.
And the memory is almost nothing.
So the other memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just went into it
Was
just
that-
then.
Was that when you did that look,
Yeah.
or was that
I know. I just went. I wonder where it, because I just was curious. I thought, I wonder
Yeah.
what's happened to Harriet's blue coat, and actually, that.
Seems to be like you're looking like over there. You didn't look there before. So.
Yeah. No, that was where I sort of stored the memory. Was the blue coat was up there somewhere.
Right. Okay. So. Yeah, access the whole sort of package of information and just notice what the format is now.
It's quite hard to get the the picture now. In fact, I can see the sea, and it's rough, but the kids aren't even in it.
Yeah.
It's just a rough sea, but I don't feel anything. When we started, I felt quite tight here.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel tight.
Well, it's just a rough sea.
Just a rough sea.
It's quite lovely.
Yeah.
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 Great. So what we could do now, kind of rattling on because we're being filmed, but so normally we'd probably chat and chill out a wee bit more. But can you take yourself to thinking about taking the dog out for a walk, or the dogs, and they
Just
sort
him,
of,
one, yeah.
yeah, and he disappears off
Yeah.
after something, or you maybe look away for a moment and he disappears off, and just notice what your brain gives you, really, or what your emotions are about it.
No, it's fine. I mean, he goes up, he disappears all the time, but he always comes back. And I'm not going fantasizing about the fact that he's run into a private area, and it's always worse when I'm with my wife, actually, because she always panics about him running off, and I panic less, but no, it feels fine.
What if you havened your wife to be more chilled out?
She'd say, "Don't do any of that psychological stuff on me." As do the kids.
What if next time she responds like that, you have more of a bit of a giggle internally?
Yeah, no,
More
I think
of a relax,
yeah.
like a kind of, like if you sort of switched your response a bit.
Yeah, I could do that.
Because it's a bit different now, because kids are all grown up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. They don't get in till sort of 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and regularly.
And that's
so.
up to them. That's
their stuff.
It's nothing to do with you.
18 and 20, so.
Yeah. Yes. What if she does?
I did pick up my daughter, took her out of a pub over my shoulder, stuck her in the car and drove her home about 5 months ago. But that was just because she was being irresponsible.
Well, she's just growing up.
But she was 20 then as well.
Still young. I was reading something recently about structures in the brain about making decisions like that, about whether to get really sort of ridiculously hammered or not. And apparently it's not till 23 or something that they finally form some sort of decision. That's partly why car insurance went up as well.
Oh, right.
And it's a sort of poor decision making because the structure's not there in the brain. So.
Do you know, I've just noticed there's sort of tears, but they're not. Can you see them?
Yeah, a wee bit.
Yeah, there's a bit. I think they're laughter tears.
Yeah, or they maybe are the tears I was talking about, those sort of sticky tears.
There's definitely a couple of tears just there, which came when I was laughing about sticking her over my shoulder.
Yeah. Good. It's really good, thank you. Do you find it
nice.
interesting?
Yeah, fascinating.
It's fast, eh?
Yeah, very fast.
And it's because we're making a tissue change, it's permanent.
Yeah.
So then when there's
And the tissue change is the retraction, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've gone from in the amygdala, a neuron with, AMPA receptors held in place so that every time you come across the sensory data, so maybe that's what was going on with dogs, similar kind of structure even. So say it was,
it's someone that you have responsibility for.
Yeah.
And who is pretty powerless, really.
Yeah.
Not being, and not being able to control it.
Yeah.
So the same thing when the dog disappears and the kids disappeared.
And also just out of sight, so the structure of it. And if something happens and it's a sunny day, then every time it's a sunny day, the AMPA receptors are going to be going whoop whoop, and releasing adrenaline and cortisol and dopamine into your system. So then we have these responses. So our response might be to feel stuck, or it might be to feel a bit fighty. So that might come up as a bit of
and at the original incident, the cortisol would have been really high then, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that continues. And then, or it might be even something can happen and you've just had a cake, so it's every time you have that same taste again or same scent again, then the alarm system set off. And then it generalises, of course, because we we then basically go, oh, well, you know, if it's a certain amount of that data is all that complex content, and the context as well, it happens, say you've got 4 elements of it again, and you're feeling a bit grumpy, and you get a bit grumpy with somebody, and then they get a bit grumpy back, and then you know, it's all sort of building on it. And so when you do something like this depotentation process, so like you're asking, it's a tissue change, what also can happen is it moves all sorts of different things, so our patterns can change in quite unusual ways. I was working with somebody once who was very angry, wanted to actually murder somebody, and had been sent to me by a judge. And so we worked on that, just as we have done. And afterwards he said, oh, there's a bee, you know, and it looks like a cat. It looks like a ginger cat. And I was really interested in that. And it turned out, after, because I sort of let him go about, and then I said, what is it with the bee? And he said, well, I've been phobic of bees all my life. Right, since he was a baby, he was terrified of bees. So somehow or other, by depotentating the AMPA receptors of the anger about this particular person at that time, it also, the bee phobia
So it sort of generalised over to something else.
Maybe what had happened was, let's say, somebody who looked a bit like them. Say it was a person with red hair. In his early childhood, he'd been involved. The two of them had been involved in and then he got stung by a bee. And then later on in life, he met somebody who looked a bit like him, took an instant dislike for no reason, you know. But in actual fact, it's an AMPA receptor driven reason. And then that relationship broke down more and more until it became a. You know? And then he wrote back to me and apologised, actually. He said that, you know, he didn't expect it to work, and he's actually been for a pint with the guy, and he's just a guy.
Gosh, that's great, isn't it?
It's really great.
Yeah.
Really great. So I just think if we could teach everybody in schools, and if everybody knew how to do this.
Yeah. Especially with anger.
Yeah. And fear as well, you know, when people get afraid. And so the responses really are being frozen, you know. So in nature we see it like when a snake plays dead, but in everyday life it can just be having a lump in your throat, a bit like earlier on when I was speaking, I couldn't quite say what it was. It was sort of stuck. I was stuck. Or fight. So it's, you know, we might think of an animal attacking, but when it happens in human society, it can just be being grumpy because I don't like that, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to go to school. Being unable to learn because the anxiety is really high, so you can't take new learnings in, lack of flexibility. And then we also have flee response, where you just want to leave, just think. And then that becomes, if we look at it, it's also procrastination. It's like, I don't want to do that. And I think there's another one as well that I call funky chicken, which is when we kind of play the fool to keep safe. So it's a bit like we see, you know, we drink too much, or we fool around, or, you know, even like your daughter getting drunk, you know, maybe actually going to the pub's quite stressful, you know, that sort of whole social networking thing, so it's easier just to get hammered. That's one solution to try out, and then we generally find that doesn't work, so we do, but not for some people.
No, I think
becomes
that's
a solution they try again and again.
Yeah, that just finding it, just sort of like belittling it and making it funny and making it daft,
Yeah, so with something like that, it might even, you know, if I notice myself doing something like that, I'd be like, maybe I need a bit of havening about socialising, or maybe somebody it's worrying me a wee bit, and then that might track back to some minor-ish event in primary 2 or something.
Yeah.
So
it makes good sense.
So if, when we'd been checking back, when you were thinking about the dog, you felt fine, but if not, we might have done a bit of affirmational or hopeful or something, and started working from there until... Yeah.
I mean, just at the end there, I'm thinking about normally if it's a really stormy, I go to Cornwall for 2 weeks every Easter, and if it's really, really stormy, I sort of like the storm, but I also don't feel 100% at ease. But I want that will be an interesting one to see whether...
That's one you could check just now if you like. If you close your eyes and just imagine yourself. Where about in Cornwall would you go?
Travone Bay, sort of just not far from Padstow, but it's always wild there.
Yeah.
Right on the sort of point, really.
Yeah, and the light in Cornwall's amazing as well.
Yeah.
So something extraordinary about the light. So imagine yourself there and just notice if the feeling in your body is like, oh, this is kind of, let's go out there.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's it's kind of curious, as we said earlier, rather than, and I'm just kind of doing a bit of a body scan and looking for any tightness or fear there isn't any.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to make a difference.
Yeah, enjoy storms more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was good.
Good.
Thank you.